I'm starting 2024 off with a Five Nights at Freddy's Grand Prix. In case you didn't see my Pokemon Grand Prix, what this means is that for 3 of my Monday videos in a row, I'm going to turn Five Nights at Freddy's characters into different kinds of things. And then if one of those videos in particular, like today's, gets a lot of really great suggestions in the comments for what to do in a sequel, or brings in a lot of new subscribers, or I just really particularly like making it, then I might do a sequel after the Grand Prix is over. So leave me suggestions, subscribe if you're new here, and get ready to enjoy a topic that my subscribers have been asking me to go back to for over a year now, adapting more of the Five Nights at Freddy's story and characters into a zombie apocalypse story. This is technically a sequel episode, but it has a new main character and you don't have to have seen the first episode to understand what's going on. So let's get into some FNAF characters as zombies and zombie apocalypse survivors. Let's go!
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
As Michael Afton walked up to the shattered and blood-splattered door of his childhood home, a wave of guilt washed over him. When the apocalypse had started 12 years ago, he'd come back here a few times, trying to find any sign of his mom or little sister, but eventually he'd given up looking, and now that he was once again all alone, he deeply regretted not having tried harder. Michael's world had been overtaken by zombies in a matter of months when the first infected appeared. Some survivors said that it was estimated over 1 billion people had been killed and reawakened into the living dead within a month of the whole thing starting. Now, the world certainly had far more of those flesh-hungry monsters than it did regular surviving humans. 2 months after it had started, Michael had met up with a group of other survivors and had created a small but safe settlement a few hours outside his hometown. He'd been living there ever since, but a week ago, it had finally been discovered and raided by zombies, and as far as Michael knew, he was the only survivor. With nowhere else to go, he decided to just come back to his family home, not expecting to find anything, but at least having a place to head. He walked inside, and it was clear that some zombies had come through, but it looked empty of the undead for now. He went into the kitchen, and his heart swelled, then quickly broke, as he thought about every Saturday morning before the apocalypse had started, sitting at the table with his younger sister Elizabeth, as their mom prepared them both Eggs Benedict for breakfast. But after that thought passed, though, he noticed in the middle of the table was a cell phone attached to a portable solar charger, with a note beside it. Michael's heart pounded as he wiped dust off of it and read the words, "Michael, please watch." It had been too long for him to tell if it was his mom or sister's handwriting, but he immediately turned on the phone to see a video. A whole set of videos dated from the start of the apocalypse until 3 months in. They were all recorded by his mother, Clara, and while he was choked up seeing her, any happiness that came with it soon turned to rage. Through the series of videos, Clara told Michael that his father had come back to their home and kidnapped his younger sister, Elizabeth, just after the zombies first appeared. Clara, a now retired but once world-renowned ballet dancer, had divorced William Afton 5 years before the apocalypse had begun for being a cruel and angry and hateful man who despised the world. After that, William hadn't even bothered to try and get custody of Michael, as the boy often butted heads with his old man for not treating his mother better, but for some reason Elizabeth acted like William was a great dad. Because of that, William would make an effort to see her, but never Michael. He'd actively ignore his son, and the few times they did see each other, he'd refer to him in passing as Mickey, as if he'd forgotten his son's own name. Michael had grown resentful of his father for blatantly not caring about him, and all that anger was suddenly reignited in that moment, hearing what William had done to Elizabeth. It was almost making Michael hope that the man was still alive, just so Michael could cut his dad's head off. Michael skipped ahead in the videos to the last one to see if his mom ever found Elizabeth, and the answer was unclear. The last video showed Clara standing outside the doors of William Afton's old storage unit. She said that she'd found out that William had built some kind of bunker beneath it, almost as if he'd known somehow that the apocalypse was going to come. His mom said that she was pretty sure Elizabeth was down there and that she was going to try and get her by whatever force necessary. She'd clearly raided a hardware store and was decked out in construction pads and was carrying an axe. Her last words to him were to say, "Michael, if I never see you again, remember that no matter how scary and dark the world gets, there will always be people out there to love and support you." It was just the kind of overly optimistic thing his mom would say, but that was her last video. Michael's mind immediately jumped to horrific images of William killing his mother, but if she was dead, how had the phone been here with a note? He grabbed the note and flipped it over, desperate for more information, but what he saw only made him more furious. On the back were a set of 10 numbers, along with the words, "Come join us, Mickey." Michael didn't know what was more horrifying, the thought of William having killed Elizabeth and Clara, or the thought of them still being alive as his prisoners. Michael had no idea how long that note and phone had been waiting for him. For all he knew, his father's storage unit bunker had been raided by zombies or looters a long time ago, but he had to go see for himself. His dad was a paranoid guy with some kind of secret government job that Michael never knew much about, so it wouldn't surprise him if he had made some extra secure doomsday bunker that was still keeping the madman safe. It took Michael 3 days to hike through his town, having to hide for hours at a time to stay out of the jaws of passing zombies. By the time he reached the Cawthon and Sons storage site where his father's bunker was, Michael was exhausted. So, despite being desperate to get inside and see what was going on, he let himself sleep for a few hours to ensure he was ready for a fight. He did not sleep well, but well enough to re-energize. He did a quick scan through of his supplies before going in. He had a high-powered flashlight in case it was dark, a knife, a sledgehammer, and a pistol, but with no bullets left for it. Though if he ever found one, he swore to put it right between his dad's eyes. Michael snuck through the site until he found the unit his mother was standing in front of in the video. It was far more run down looking now, but it was still there. He slid up the metal garage door to see that on the floor was a latch with a keypad. Michael pulled out the note from his dad, once more infuriated by the message, but typed the 10 numbers he saw. 915-512-9575. The door dinged and opened up. There was a ladder that went straight down into the dark. He considered calling out for his mother or sister, but wanted to maintain any possible element of surprise he might have. He gripped his knife in his hand and left his flashlight off for now as he climbed down into the dark, musty bunker. He hadn't been sure what to expect from the layout of this place, but from the dim green lighting barely illuminating the place, he could see that he'd come down into a hallway that was lined with dark rooms, with windows so that, if it had been bright enough, he could have seen into them. He crept close to one of the rooms and pressed his face against the glass. As dark as it was, Michael could swear he saw a figure, twirling, dancing, like his mother used to do. He thought about turning on his light, but instead tapped gently on the glass, whispering, "Mom?" The figure froze for a moment, then kept twirling. With his hands shaking, Michael raised his flashlight, aimed it towards the figure, then turned it on. The beam of light illuminated what was left of Michael's mother. The nightmarish, zombified figure whipped its head towards him and shrieked. She charged and slammed her hands against the glass. Michael stumbled back and instantly wanted to erase this image from his mind, but also couldn't look away. But seconds later, something bashed against the glass in the room behind him. He spun around and shone his light to see another zombified person, but this one was a bulky, mutated 8-foot-tall man whose hand looked like it had been warped into a smaller blue zombie attached to him. It was unlike any infected Michael had ever seen. He couldn't handle the images before him. He took one last heartbroken look at what was once his mother, then ran back to the ladder. He climbed through the hole, but just as he was slamming the door shut, he could have sworn he heard the voice of his sister calling,
"Please, don't leave me down here, Michael."
But the door shut and all went quiet. He dropped to the ground and leaned back against the storage room wall, panting and with his mind leaping back and forth from devastation to fury, then to concern. Had he actually just heard his sister, or was it his mind playing tricks on him? Could Elizabeth still be down there? Could William have been down there and he just hadn't seen him? He sat there thinking for a few hours, unsure of what to do. He eventually left to walk around and try and clear his head, still having to dodge around packs of zombies. He stayed close to the bunker so that he could keep checking to see if his father came in or out, but there was no movement from the outside. He eventually became exhausted enough from his fear and speculating that he had to go to sleep again. He found a safe place to let himself pass out, but was haunted by dreams of his sister coming to the same fate as his mother in that bunker. When he woke up, it was nighttime, but the first thought on his mind was his mom's last words to him. There will always be people out there to love and support you. Michael didn't really believe that that was true with how much of his world was now the Walking Dead, but if there was any chance his sister was still alive, then he needed to prove his love and support for her by going back down there to find out. As Michael stepped down onto the ladder again, he could hear zombies stumbling past the storage unit just outside. He'd left the bunker door open last time, but this time decided to shut it just in case, then trudged down into the pit. He shone his flashlight again, and the creature that was once Michael's mother slammed against the glass at the site. He did his best not to look at her, or the being in the other room, but soon he heard a different kind of sound down the hall. It was like a creaking metal door swinging open. Michael couldn't see what made the sound, but he could hear something stomping its way closer and closer. Michael considered just bolting back up the ladder, but then a voice spoke out through a scrambled PA system.
Michael? Is that really you? Please, don't leave me again.
Michael called out, asking if that was Elizabeth.
I can't hear you, but you have to help us. Dad should have been back by now. He could be here any minute. We have to hurry.
But as soon as she said that, the thing that was making the noise came into view. Another zombie, this one nearly 9 feet tall, with fangs, blood-splattered lips, and cheeks, coming marching down the hallway. Elizabeth quickly yelled,
There's a vent on the ground. I used to use them to hide from Dad. Finnick won't be able to fit, but you will. Hurry!
Michael shone his light down and saw that there was a vent, but it looked barely big enough for him to fit. He wasn't keen to try crawling through it. Instead, he pulled out his sledgehammer from his bag, marched forward, and swung it right for the slow-moving zombie's head. But its hands were a lot faster than its feet. It caught the hammer, yanked it from Michael, and tossed it behind him. Looked like the vent was the only option. Michael tossed his bag in the zombie's face to distract it as he dove to the ground, holding only his flashlight, and crawled into the cramped vent. His back was scraping the top of the narrow path, and he was afraid that if there was any turn, he wouldn't be able to bend enough to make it. But he kept shimmying forward, still hearing the zombie's groans behind him. His heart nearly exploded in terror as he felt something bump up against the bottom of his boot, but he kept wriggling in farther, and the sounds got quieter and quieter. He faintly heard over the PA again,
Michael, I can't see you in there, but if you got away, turn left to get to the scooping room. You can let me out from there.
Michael didn't know what freaked him out more, being stuck in this vent or having to find a place called the scooping room. Either way, he kept on going. He got to the turn and had to bend and contort his back in an incredibly uncomfortable angle to try and get himself through. At one point, he got his arm wedged between him and the wall, and it seemed like he was never going to be able to free it. Soon he was panting so hard in terror that he just started to thrash, and finally he yanked his arm free and got around the bend. He crawled another 10 feet and moved a grate out of the way, finally slinking out into another room. He leapt up quickly and shook his whole body, then whipped his flashlight around to ensure there were no zombies in the room. He saw nothing alive or undead, but he did see plenty that he didn't like. This room had a bloody chair with arm, leg, and neck straps attached to it. On either side of it were tray tables with a whole myriad of equally bloody tools. The walls were lined with sliding metal shelves holding dozens, if not hundreds, of different vials with tissue samples, chemicals, and a bunch of concoctions labeled Project Remnant. Finally, in the middle of the main wall was some sort of control board with cameras pointing into 4 different rooms. Each monitor had 3 buttons below it, one to open the door, one for a speaker, and one that just had an electric symbol on it. One room showed his zombified mother, another held the burly mutated zombie with a deformed hand, one room had no zombie and a busted open door, and the 4th was dark, but Michael could make out a tall feminine silhouette standing near the wall with the faintest glimpse of red hair. Just like Elizabeth had had. He pressed the speaker button to that room and asked if it was really her.
It is. I can't believe you found me. Please let me out, Michael. Dad should be back by now.
He cringed at her calling that maniac Dad, but he pressed the door open button, then saw the silhouette run out of the room. He heard footsteps coming towards the door of this lab, then a rapid knocking.
Quick, Michael, let me in. Finnick saw me and he's coming.
Michael ran to the door, unlocked it, and threw it open, ready to embrace his sister, when a hand shot up at his throat from the dark and raised him into the air.
Thanks for hurrying, Michael.
We're all really hungry.
As Michael choked and tried to hold himself up, he was horrified by what he was seeing. It did look like a grown-up version of his sister, but with rotting, cut-up flesh and an extra bony arm coming out of her stomach. She practically skipped into the room, holding Michael in the air by his neck with ease. As she did, the free zombie that she called Finnick stomped into the room behind her.
Don't worry about him, he's just hungry. We'll feed him soon.
She pressed the door open buttons to release the other two zombies. Michael pleaded to know what happened to her and what was going on. She just told him,
Daddy saved me, of course, and he could have saved you too, if you deserved to be saved like me.
She slammed Michael into the chair and strapped down his limbs as the other zombies came into the room.
Daddy's been gone a lot longer than usual. He might have liked to have seen you, but we gotta go find him, and we need to get our strength up first.
As she said that, she raised a bloody saw to the side of Michael's head. In that moment, he met her lifeless gaze. She did have some traces of Elizabeth in her appearance, but looking into this monster's eyes, he knew his sister wasn't in there anymore. Not really. Whatever William had done to her had taken her away. There was nobody left to love or support Michael, so maybe it was okay to just let it all end here. But just as he was accepting his fate, the faint sound of a metal latch swinging open could be heard. Michael and Elizabeth both looked over to another monitor, this one from the outside of the bunker showing the storage room entrance. Michael assumed when he glanced over that he'd see William, but instead he saw a group of survivors, grizzled-looking ones with armor and weapons. He immediately screamed out, "There are 4 zombies down here, be careful!" Elizabeth's extra arm punched him across the head so hard he thought he was going to black out. She and the other zombies all headed for the exit of the lab, but before they could even get out, the door was kicked in and a woman with a shotgun came in blasting. Close behind her was a lady with a baseball bat with nails through it and a whole crew of armed survivors, firing and swinging at the zombies. Some were doing more damage than others, but these things clearly weren't regular zombies. Whatever William had done to them, they were far more powerful and more intelligent monsters. The girl with the shotgun spotted Michael and managed to duck around the zombies while they were distracted with her allies to get to him. She quickly unlatched his bonds and he leapt up and thanked her, ready to run for the door. But if he was going to have to run, he wasn't about to let William keep whatever precious research he was doing down here. Michael ran over to the shelves of chemicals and compounds, grabbing one container of Project Remnant to shove in his pocket, then rocked them. Vials started falling off and crashing to the floor, and Elizabeth took notice. Her eyes shot open and she yelled,
Stop him!
All the other zombies instantly listened to her and they ran towards Michael. But they were too late. He rocked the shelves one more time and both came tumbling over, crashing and splashing mysterious chemicals all over the 4 zombies. The room filled with a foul stench, but it just seemed to make the zombies angry. Michael dodged around them near the control board, then noticed again the electric-symboled buttons under each door. He had a hunch about what they might do and slammed his arm down across the board, pressing all 4 buttons. Sparks of electricity suddenly burst out of the chemical-soaked zombies as they all tensed in agony. The shock ignited some of the chemicals on them into plumes of swirling, flaming toxic gas. The 4 zombies started to melt and warp and cry in horrific shrieks. Michael ran towards the door, but a twisted arm of zombie Ennard snatched his leg, making him flop to the ground. He looked back to see that he was being dragged by a monstrous fusion of all 4 zombies shrieking at him.
He'll come back! He always comes back!
One of the survivors swung an axe and chopped the monster's tendril off, as another helped Michael up. They all ran for the door, hearing the sound of a monster shambling after them, but not looking back to check, as they all shot up the ladder, then slammed the bunker door shut. Michael profusely thanked them all, before asking who the heck they were and how they'd known the passcode to get into William Afton's bunker. The group told him that they'd all been kidnapped by William Afton and raised in different bunkers by him, before they'd all eventually learned that he'd been the one to start the entire zombie apocalypse. Somehow, Michael wasn't even that surprised, and he was happy to hear that this group had bested William in their last encounter with him, but that he was also now one of these intelligent infected, and likely only temporarily trapped in one of his other bunkers. Michael asked them to show him where. But they eased him off a bit. They said they all wanted to finish him off too, but none of their weapons seemed to work on these next level infected that William had made. For now, Michael could come with them as they all regrouped and figured out where to go from there. And so, Michael left with these new friends who'd saved his life, and seemed to have the exact same goal that he did. Even if this had been a horrific ordeal, and he hadn't gotten Clara or Elizabeth back, in a way, his mother had still been right. There had been more people out there to support him, just not people he'd expected.
Well, that was a grim story to start the year off with, but hey, maybe I'll just have to turn this into another of my Fnaf trilogies and end it on a much more positive note. By the way, I will make a poster out of the art from this episode, putting all the characters on one big poster, and I'll have that linked in the description. Also, if you're new here, you might want to check out the first episode of this if you haven't seen it already, or you might like some of my other Five Nights at Freddy's stuff, like my Five Nights at Freddy's Mech Armor trilogy, or my Dragon episodes, turning the characters into Marvel supervillains. I'll link a playlist of my best Five Nights at Freddy's stuff in the description. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote from James Clear. The information that you consume on a daily basis is the soil from which your future thoughts will grow. It's a good reminder and encouragement to think about what you're listening to on a regular basis. Because if it's people and shows that are always talking about how horrible everything is, or encouraging you to be hateful and fearful towards people with different viewpoints than you, then that's wiring you to be a cynical, hateful, and fearful person. But there are plenty of great things you can listen to out there too, that help inspire you to be kinder and stronger. So have a think about what information you're consuming on a daily basis. I hope that's inspiring, I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday, which is finally the delayed December community redraw.